Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are tackling something today that, on the surface, feels like it should be kind of dry. I mean, the title is The Ecology Book.
Right. It doesn't exactly scream page-turner.
No, it doesn't. But once you actually crack the cover, you realize it's really a philosophical thriller.
It is. It's a detective story. It's a story of how humanity figured out where life comes from, how it changes, and, how this whole planetary system actually works.
And I think for most people, when you say the word ecology, their brain immediately goes to a very specific and maybe a slightly boring place.
Mm-hmm.
You think of recycling bins, maybe saving the rainforest, or just nature, birds, bees, that sort of thing.
The bugs and bunny rabbits view of the world, as you said, the cute, fuzzy stuff.
Exactly. But the foreword in this book, it's by Tony Juniper. He just slaps that idea down right away. He basically argues that ecology isn't just a branch of biology. It's the context for everything.
It's the stage. I think that's the best way to put it. We spend all of our time, obsessing over the actors on the stage.
Right. Politics, economics.
Technology, the stock market. We think those are the things that determine the future of our civilization.
Yeah.
But Juniper's point is that they're just plays being performed on a stage. And the stage itself is the atmosphere, the water cycles, the soil, the rock.
And if the stage collapses,
The play stops. It doesn't matter how good the actors are or how dramatic the story is. If the stage rots through, the show is over.
that is a terrifyingly practical way to look at it. It really raises the stakes immediately. We're not just identifying leaves today. We are talking about the fundamental operating system of the planet.
And for a very long time, we didn't even know there was an operating system. Or, well, if we did, we thought the operating system was fixed, perfect, unchangeable.
This is where I really want to start, because the history here is just fascinating. Before we could even get to the science of how things change, we have to understand how people used to think. The source material calls it this perfect static world.
This is the idea of essentialism. And it was the dominant worldview for, thousands of years, from the ancient Greeks through the Middle Ages, right up until, really, the mid-1800s.
So let's say I'm an educated person living in London in, 1750. How do I view a dog or a dandelion?
You view it as a finished product, a complete thought. A dog is a dog because it has the perfect, eternal essence of a dog. It was created that way at the beginning of time.
And it's never changed.
It has never changed, and it never will change.
At a furniture store, right?
Yeah.
You buy the chair, that's a chair. It doesn't slowly morph into a sofa over the next few decades.
Exactly. This was the concept of the great chain of being, or the ladder of life. It was this very neat, very tidy hierarchy.
Where everything has its place.
Everything has its place.
Right.
God is at the top, then you have the angels, then humans, men above women, of course. Then you get down to the animals, the plants, and finally, rocks and minerals at the very bottom.
And you stay on your rung of the ladder.
You stay on your rung. The idea of a species changing. The thought of a monkey becoming a human or a fish becoming a frog, it wouldn't just be wrong, it would be considered insanity. It implies the creator made a mistake.
Right, that he needed to issue a software patch. And since the creator is perfect, the creation must also be perfect and therefore static. It's a painting, not a movie.
A finished painting. The paint is dry, you can admire it, but you can't change it.
So how do we break that worldview? Because obviously we now know the world is chaotic and dynamic and constantly in flux. But looking at the timeline in the book, the thing that starts cracking this foundation, it wasn't a biologist. It wasn't someone staring at animals.
No.
It was the Industrial Revolution.
It's always economics that drives science, isn't it? In the late 1700s, especially in Britain, we started, for the first time, tearing the earth apart on an industrial scale.
We needed canals.
We needed canals to move goods. We needed coal for the new steam engines. We needed quarries for stone to build the factories. So you had these armies of men, navvies, just digging.
And when you dig that deep, you stop looking at the surface of the painting and you start looking at the cross-section of the canvas itself.
Right. For the first time, people were cutting straight through hillsides and realizing the rock wasn't just a solid, uniform block. It was layered.
Strata.
Like a layer cake. And inside those layers, the workers who were, just uneducated laborers, they were finding things that were deeply disturbing to the educated elite of the time.
They were finding the dragon in the room.
They were finding fossils. Now, people had found fossils before, of course, but they usually explain them away. Oh, that's a weirdly shaped rock, or that's a bone from a giant that died in a recent flood.
Just anomalies.
But when you're digging a mine 1,000 feet deep, you find things that are undeniable. You find perfectly preserved seashells on top of a mountain.
Which is very hard to explain with a static worldview.
Very hard. And you find bones, giant ribs, skulls with tusks that look like elephants, but you're in the middle of the English countryside.
This brings us to Georges Cuvier. He's the guy who finally had to address this, right? Because the standard excuse for these giant bones was, oh, that's an elephant. It's just hiding somewhere we haven't looked yet.
It's hiding in the unexplored parts of America, or maybe Siberia. That was the genuine belief. In fact, Thomas Jefferson, a man of science, told Lewis and Clark to keep an eye out for living mastodons when they went west.
Wow.
He didn't believe they could be extinct. He couldn't accept the idea that a whole species could just end.
Because that implies a flaw in the original design, a bug in the system.
Correct. But Cuvier was a brilliant anatomist. He was a master of comparative anatomy. So he didn't just look at the bone and say, looks like an elephant. He looked at the teeth. He compared the molar of a woolly mammoth fossil to a living Indian elephant and a living African elephant. And he showed, mathematically and structurally, that the grinding surfaces were completely different.
So it wasn't just a big, hairy elephant. It was a totally distinct species.
A different kind of animal entirely. And since it clearly wasn't walking down the streets of Paris, it must be gone. Extinct. Cuvier proved, beyond any reasonable doubt, that the list of living things isn't fixed. It can get shorter. Species can be wiped out.
That must have been a massive psychological blow to society at that time.
It was terrifying. It introduced the concept of death on a planetary scale. It meant that creation wasn't safe. It wasn't permanent.
And Cuvier tried to manage the panic, right, with his theory of catastrophism.
He did. He tried to have it both ways. He said, okay, things die, but only because of these giant, sudden, violent disasters.
Like Noah's flood from the Bible.
Exactly like that. He thought the Earth goes through these periodic revolutions, massive floods, earthquakes that just wipe the slate clean. Then new life appears. He was a little vague on how, and we start over.
So he was trying to keep the static world model alive by just adding a few reset buttons into the history.
Precisely. It was a compromise. But then you have the geologists, the guys who looked at the rocks and said, I don't see a reset button. I see a really, really, really slow movie.
Uniformitarians.
James Hutton, and later, and more famously, Charles Lyell. These are the giants of geology. They looked at a river valley, a huge canyon, and they asked a very simple question.
How long would it take that little stream at the bottom to cut this massive valley?
If you assume the stream flows at the same rate it does today, that's the key. That's uniformitarianism. The laws of physics and nature are uniform through time. They have always been the same.
So erosion is erosion.
Right. If water erodes rock at 1 millimeter a year today, it eroded rock at 1 millimeter a year 1,000,000 years ago.
And if you do that math.
The Earth cannot possibly be 6,000 years old, which was the accepted biblical age. It has to be millions, maybe hundreds of millions, maybe billions of years old. Hutton famously looked at the rock strata in Scotland and said he saw no vestige of a beginning, no prospect of an end.
This is the concept of deep time.
Deep time. And it is arguably the most important scientific discovery before evolution itself. It's the blank canvas. It's the necessary ingredient.
Why?
Because you can't transform a fish into a lizard in 6,000 years. It's not enough time. But in 600 million years, anything is possible. Time becomes the creative force.
Okay, so we have our canvas deep time, and we have our motivation extinction, the idea that things can die out and need to be replaced or changed. Now we need the mechanism for change.
Yes. How does it happen?
And the first person to really take a swing at a cohesive theory is someone who gets mocked a lot today, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck.
Poor Lamarck. I always feel for him. He's become the punchline of biology jokes, but he was actually a genius for his time. He was the first person to look at the fossil record and say, hey, this isn't a series of separate creations and catastrophes. It's a ladder. Life is climbing.
He believed in transmutation. That species actively change over time.
Yes. He was the first to propose a real scientific theory of evolution. He just got the how famously wrong.
This is the use it or lose it theory.
Oh, yeah.
The inheritance of acquired characteristics.
Effectively, yes. The classic example everyone uses is the giraffe.
Right.
Lamarck thought, okay, the ancestral giraffe likes to eat acacia leaves. The leaves are high up on the trees. So the giraffe stretches its neck every day. It's straining, reaching.
I mean, just like if I go to the gym and lift weights, my muscles get bigger.
Exactly. The giraffe's neck, through this lifelong effort, gets a tiny bit longer. And then, and this is the crucial leap of faith in his theory, Lamarck believed that this stretched neck trait would be passed down directly to its baby.
So the baby is born with a slightly longer neck.
Yeah.
And then it stretches, and his baby's born with an even longer neck, and so on.
Generation after generation, the neck gets longer. And the source also mentions the mole as the opposite example.
The lose it part of use it or lose it.
Right. The mole lives underground in the dark. It stops using its eyes. So over its lifetime, the eyes atrophy. They wither away from disuse. And then the mole has babies with withered eyes.
You know, it makes so much intuitive sense. I mean, it feels fair. If I practice the piano my whole life and become a virtuoso, I kind of feel like my kid should be born a little better at piano.
It feels like justice, doesn't it? That hard work pays off in your lineage. But as we now know, that's just not how biology works. If you get a tan at the beach, your baby isn't born tan. If you lose a finger in an accident, your child is born with 10 fingers.
Your life experiences aren't recorded in the DNA that you pass on.
Exactly. The instruction manual isn't edited by your actions. But you called him a giant. Why?
Because he broke the static mold. He was the one who said organisms are not fixed. They are actively shaped by their environment. That link, the dynamic relationship between the animal and its world, that is the absolute foundation of ecology. He just didn't have the right mechanism. Which brings us to the man who found the mechanism, Charles Darwin. But the thing that really surprised me in the reading is that Darwin wasn't some radical anti-religious rebel from the start.
Not at all. He was studying to be an Anglican parson at Cambridge. He was an orthodox believer in the static created world. He was just a rich kid with a very expensive hobby, collecting beetles.
And he gets invited on a boat ride.
A 5-year boat ride around the world. The voyage of the HMS Beagle.
Which sounds glamorous, but the book makes it clear it was not.
It was miserable. Darwin was violently seasick for most of it. The ship was tiny, the conditions were cramped, but it gave him something no other biologist had ever had before, a truly global data set.
He saw the world. He didn't just read about it in a book.
He saw the coast of South America. He was digging in cliffs in Patagonia, and he found the fossil of a giant sloth, a megatherium the size of an elephant, and right next to these fossils running around in the bushes were modern living sloths.
That must have been incredibly jarring. It's like finding a fossil of a giant Ford Model T and seeing a Mini Cooper driving right past it.
It just screams relationship, doesn't it? It implies that the giant thing is the ancestor of this little thing. Why would God create a giant version, kill it off, and then, in the same exact spot, create a separate mini version? It just didn't make logical sense.
And then he gets to the Galapagos, the islands that changed everything.
The laboratory. These are young, volcanic islands, relatively isolated out in the middle of the Pacific. And what Darwin found there was variation on a theme over and over again.
Let's start with the tortoises.
The vice governor of the islands mentioned to Darwin, almost as a throwaway comment, that he could tell which island a tortoise came from just by looking at its shell.
Really?
Yeah. On the drier islands where the main food source was cactus pads high off the ground, the tortoises had these saddleback shells that flared up at the front, allowing them to crane their necks way up.
But on the wetter islands?
On the wetter islands, where there was plenty of grass and moss on the ground, they had big, heavy dome shells. They didn't need to stretch, so the shell didn't have that saddle shape.
And the finches?
The famous finches, though, funny enough, Darwin didn't even realize they were all finches at first. He collected them, but he misidentified them. He thought some were blackbirds, some were wrens, some were grosbeaks.
He wasn't an expert on birds.
Not at all. It wasn't until he got back to London and gave his collection to a proper ornithologist, John Gould, that the real story emerged. Gould looked at them and said, "Hey, Charles, these aren't different types of birds. These are all finches."
And that's when the penny dropped.
That's when the penny dropped. What was the realization? It was that a single species of finch must have gotten blown over from the mainland millions of years ago. Then that ancestral population spread out to the different islands.
And each island was a different world.
A different world with a different food. On one island, the main food was hard nuts, so the birds with slightly thicker, stronger beaks survived and reproduced. On another island, the main food was insects and tree bark, so the birds with thinner, pointier beaks did better.
They radiated out to fill the available jobs. Adaptive radiation.
Exactly, but Darwin still had the Lamarck problem. How? How does the beak actually get thicker? The bird isn't doing push-ups with its face to make its beak stronger and then passing that on. He was stuck.
And this is where the plot twist comes in. The answer didn't come from biology at all. It came from economics. From Thomas Malthus.
Yes. This is a few years after he's back in London. He's struggling with this problem, and he's reading for amusement, as he put it. He picks up an essay on the principle of population by Malthus.
And Malthus, as we said, was a buzzkill.
A huge buzzkill. He basically laid out some very simple, grim math. Human populations, if unchecked, grow exponentially. 2 people become 4, 4 become 8, 8 becomes 16. But food production, at best, only increases arithmetically. 1 acre becomes 2, 2 become 3, 3 become 4.
So inevitably, you're going to have more mouths than there is food to feed them.
And that leads to a check on the population. It leads to famine, war, disease. Malthus called it the struggle for existence.
And Darwin reads this, and a light bulb goes off.
A massive spotlight. He realized that what Malthus described for humans is the rule for all of nature, but on steroids. A single codfish can lay 1 million eggs. A fern can produce millions of spores.
If they all survived, the world would be solid codfish and ferns.
Exactly. But the world isn't solid codfish, which means most of them die.
Almost all of them die.
Almost all of them die. It is a constant massacre. And that was the key insight. If almost everyone dies, the question isn't why do things die? The question is who survives?
The ones that just happen to have a slight edge.
The ones that through random chance happen to be born a little faster or a little better camouflaged or with a slightly thicker beak that can crack the one nut that's available. The ones that fit the environment just a tiny bit better. That is natural selection.
It's not a guiding hand. It's a filter.
It's a brutal filter. It's a meat grinder that only lets the best fitted particles pass through to the next generation.
It's an incredible insight. But the book says he sat on this for 20 years. He was terrified to publish it.
He knew it would tear society apart. It removed the designer from the design process. It made life, including human life, a result of random chance and cruel, indifferent death. He called the process of writing it all down like confessing a murder.
And he might have taken it to his grave if he didn't get a letter in the mail one day from Alfred Russel Wallace.
The co-star of our show, the great unsung hero. Wallace was a younger, much poorer naturalist, a specimen collector working in the Malay archipelago, what's now Indonesia.
Then he's in a hut.
Lying in a hut, shaking with a malarial fever. He's having this fever dream, and in that delirium, his mind connects the exact same dots Darwin had 20 years earlier. He saw Malthus's struggle for existence. He saw the variation in the beetles and butterflies he was collecting.
And he put it together.
He put it together. Survival of the fittest. He writes it all down on a short paper, and looking for feedback, he mails it to a famous, established scientist he admires, Charles Darwin.
You can just imagine Darwin's face opening that letter.
Utter shock. 20 years of painstaking work, and this young kid from the jungle sends him the entire theory in a single letter. It was the kick he needed. His friends arranged for Wallace's paper and some of Darwin's notes to be read together, and then Darwin rushed to publish the big book on the origin of species in 1859.
So let's really break down the theory itself, because I think survival of the fittest is one of the most misunderstood phrases in all of science.
Oh, absolutely.
People hear it and they think, Jim Bro, the strongest, the fastest, the most aggressive animal wins.
Right. The lion eating the gazelle. But in evolutionary terms, fittest just means fits the best. It's like a key in a lock or a puzzle piece. If the environment is a tiny hole in a rock, the fittest creature is the smallest one that can squeeze in, not the biggest, strongest one that can't.
Let's walk through the mechanism using the beetle analogy from the source material, because I think it makes the steps really clear. So step 1, variation.
Step 1 is just acknowledging reality. You are not a clone of your siblings. Look at any population of beetles. Some are born a slightly darker shade of brown, some are a slightly lighter shade of green. Just like humans have different hair colors. That variation is natural, it's random, and it's always there.
Okay, so you've got variation. Step 2, differential reproduction, or the struggle.
The environment enters the chat. Let's say these beetles live on the bark of a dark brown tree, and their main predator is a bird that hunts by sight.
The green beetles are in big trouble.
They stand out like a neon sign. The birds see them easily and eat them. The dark brown beetles, on the other hand, are camouflaged. They blend in, so more of them survive.
They're not better in any absolute sense. They're just harder to see in this specific place.
Exactly. And because more of them survive, more of them get to reproduce. They have more baby beetles than the green ones do.
Which leads to step 3, heredity.
The surviving brown beetles have babies. And because shell color is a heritable trait-like hair color or eye color, their babies are also brown.
And if you just repeat that simple loop for 100 generations, or 1,000.
The green beetles eventually disappear entirely. The whole population is now brown. The species has evolved, it has adapted to its environment. And notice, no single beetle changed its own color.
Right, the population changed, not the individuals.
The ratio of colors in the population shifted. That's the key.
It seems so simple when you lay it out like that. It's almost just inevitable logic. But then you have these things in nature that seem to defy that logic. The peacock.
Ah, the peacock. The peacock gave Darwin a massive headache. He literally wrote in a letter that the sight of a feather in a peacock's tail, whenever he gazed at it, made him feel sick.
Because it makes no sense from a survival perspective. If nature is this ruthless filter for survival and efficiency, why would you evolve a giant iridescent heavy tail that makes you slow, makes it hard to fly, and basically acts as a giant eat-me sign for tigers?
It's an advertisement for predators. It is the opposite of camouflage.
Yeah.
It's suicide on a stick. It seems to directly contradict his entire theory of natural selection, unless
Unless there's another game being played at the same time.
there's another game being played, the mating game. Darwin realized that survival is actually secondary. The ultimate goal isn't just to live a long time, it's to pass on your genes.
So survival is just a means to an end. The end is reproduction.
Right. You can live to be 100 years old, but if you have 0 offspring, you are an evolutionary dead end, a complete failure. Your genes die with you. Whereas if you live to be 20 but have 10 kids, you've won the game.
So the giant flashy tail isn't for the tiger, it's for the lady peacocks.
The peahens. They are the judges, they are the selection pressure, and for whatever reason, they have a preference for males with the biggest, most spectacular tails.
But why? Is it just fashion? Are they just attracted to shiny things?
It's not just fashion, it's an honest signal of fitness. It's what's called the handicap principle. The male peacock is essentially broadcasting a message. He's saying, look at me, I am so strong, so healthy, I have such great genes, and I'm so good at finding food that I can afford to grow and drag this ridiculous, expensive, dangerous rug around behind me and still be alive.
It's a flex.
It is the ultimate biological flex. And because the females choose that signal, the trait for bigtails gets passed down even if it makes day-to-day survival significantly harder. Darwin called this sexual selection.
Okay, so Darwin has the mechanism for survival natural selection and the mechanism for mating sexual selection. But there was still this massive gaping hole in his theory. He didn't know how the brown beetle passed brownness to its baby. He didn't know the rules of heredity.
He had no clue. And at the time, the prevailing theory was something called blending inheritance.
Like mixing paint.
Exactly. If you have a tall dad and a short mom, you mix them together and you get a medium-sized kid. A black rabbit and a white rabbit have gray babies.
But if that were true, all the variation would disappear over time. Eventually, everyone would just be a medium-sized beige-gray blob.
Precisely. Blending inheritance washes out the very differences that natural selection needs to act upon. For the theory to work, the traits needed to stay crisp and distinct from generation to generation.
Enter the monk, Gregor Mendel.
This is one of the great tragedies in the history of science. While Darwin is in England agonizing over this problem, Gregor Mendel is in a monastery garden in Brno, in what is now the Czech Republic, methodically growing and cross-breeding thousands and thousands of pea plants.
And he wasn't seeing blending at all.
Not at all. He crossed purebred yellow peas with purebred green peas. According to blending theory, he should have gotten a bunch of yellowy green peas.
But he didn't.
He got all yellow peas, every single one. The green traits seem to have vanished completely.
But then, and this is the genius part, he took it to the next generation.
He bred those new yellow peas with each other, and in that second generation, boom, the green peas came back, out of nowhere.
So the green trait wasn't destroyed or blended away, it was just hiding.
It was recessive. The yellow trait was dominant. Mendel proved that inheritance doesn't work like mixing paint. It works like a deck of cards. You don't blend the cards, you pass on a specific, discrete card. He called them factors, we call them genes.
This was the mathematical proof Darwin needed. The variation stays in the deck, it just gets reshuffled.
It was the perfect missing piece to the puzzle. It provided the mechanism for non-blending inheritance. But Mendel published his paper in an obscure German-language journal. It had a boring title, and basically nobody read it.
Darwin never knew.
Darwin died never knowing that the answer to his biggest problem was sitting on a library shelf in Austria.
That is absolutely heartbreaking. So when did we finally put the two pieces together?
Not until the early 1900s, and it really came together in the 1930s and 40s in what's called the modern synthesis. You had these brilliant mathematical biologists like Ronald Fisher and Theodosius Dobzhansky who finally dusted off Mendel's work and jammed it together with Darwin's theory.
They gave us the math to connect the two.
They did. And in doing so, they created a new, more precise definition of evolution, they said. Evolution is a change in allele frequency in a gene pool over time.
Okay, hold on. Allele frequency. That sounds like the kind of phrase that makes people's eyes glaze over. Can you translate that for us?
Sure, think of the gene pool of a species like a giant bag of M&Ms. The genes are for color, but you can have different versions of that gene. Those versions are called alleles. So you have a blue allele and a red allele.
Okay.
Now, evolution isn't about one single M&M changing its color. It's about the overall ratio in the bag. If you take a big scoop from the bag today, and maybe it's 50% red and 50% blue.
Right.
If you come back in 1,000 years and take another scoop, and now it's 90% red and 10% blue, evolution has happened.
The frequency of the red allele has changed.
The frequency changed. That's it. That is the cold, hard, mathematical definition of evolution. It's just a statistical shift in a population.
And that leads us to the final layer of the onion, the physical stuff itself. What a gene actually is. DNA.
1953. Watson, Crick, and crucially, Rosalind Franklin and her X-ray crystallography work. We finally saw the molecule of heredity, the twisted ladder, the double helix. This is the actual instruction manual.
And seeing the manual finally explained where the variation comes from in the first place, because Darwin and Mendel, they just had to accept that some peas are yellow and some are green. They didn't know why.
Now we know why. It's a typo, a mutation.
A typo in the instruction manual.
Exactly. The DNA code is a long string of letters A, C, T, and G. Sometimes when a cell is copying that code to make a new cell or a sperm or an egg, it slips up. It makes a mistake. It writes a T where there should have been an A. Or maybe a bit of UV radiation from the sun hits the DNA and breaks a rung of the ladder.
And usually that's a bad thing, right? A typo usually breaks the machine.
Almost always. Most mutations are harmful or neutral. If you just randomly change one letter in a recipe for a cake, you're probably going to get a cake that's salty or one that doesn't rise. But every once in a billion times, you might accidentally change the recipe in a way that makes the cake better.
And nature selects for the better cake.
Precisely. Mutation is the random generator of new ideas. Natural selection is the editor that keeps the good ones and throws out the bad ones.
And the source material gives us the most famous example of watching this happen in real time.
Yeah.
The peppered moth in England.
Yes. This is the story that every biology student learns, but it's worth retelling because it's just so perfect and so visual. So, Manchester, England. Early 1800s, before the Industrial Revolution really kicks off, the trees are covered in this light-colored mottled lichen.
And the peppered moths are mostly a pale speckled color to match.
Camouflage. They're invisible to birds. Then the factories turn on. They start burning tons of coal. The air fills with soot.
And the soot kills the lichen on the tree.
Tills the lichen and coats the tree trunks in a layer of black grime.
Suddenly, being a pale moth on a black tree is a very bad idea. You're like a neon sign for birds.
It's a massacre of the pale moths. But there was always a tiny percentage of moths in the population that had a rare mutation that made their wings dark, almost black. Before the soot, those were the ones that were easily spotted and eaten first. Now
they're perfectly camouflaged. They're invisible.
So the dark moths survive, they breed, they pass on the dark wing allele, and very quickly the whole population flips. By 1895, something like 95% of the peppered moths around Manchester were the black form.
It's evolution in action.
Yeah.
But here's the really cool part of the story, the part people often miss.
The sequel.
Right. In the 1950s and 60s, Britain passed Clean Air Acts. The factories stopped belching soot, the air got cleaner, the trees got clean, the lichen started to grow back, and the moths.
They flipped back. As the trees got lighter, the dark moths became the easy targets again, and the pale speckled form made a comeback. It shows so perfectly that fitness isn't a permanent badge of honor. It is entirely dependent on the context of the environment.
That's amazing. But we also see this happening in a way that's much less fun for us. Antibiotic resistance.
This is the evolutionary arms race that we are currently losing.
Walk us through how that works. It's the same principle, right?
It's the exact same principle, just on a much faster timescale. You get a bacterial infection, say strep throat. Your doctor gives you an antibiotic. You take it, and it kills 99.999% of the bacteria in your body. You feel better.
But not 100%.
Maybe not. Maybe, just by sheer random luck, one single bacterium out of billions had a tiny mutation in its DNA that made its cell wall slightly tougher or allowed it to pump the drug out before it could do any damage. The drug couldn't kill it.
So that one tough guy survives.
And because you've just killed off all of its competition, it now has a paradise of food and space all to itself, and bacteria divide very, very fast, every 20 minutes sometimes.
So within hours.
Within hours, you have millions, then billions of bacteria, and all of them are the direct descendants of that one resistant superbug.
And now the drug doesn't work on your infection anymore.
And worse, you can pass that resistant strain to someone else. This is evolution happening in our hospitals, in our bodies right now. It is not a historical theory. It is a clear and present danger.
There's also the Lenski experiment mentioned in the book, which I found just mind-blowing, this long-term E. coli experiment.
Oh, the LTE, the long-term evolution experiment. It's incredible. Richard Lenski started it back in 1988 with 12 identical flasks of E. coli bacteria, and he just let them grow day after day, transferring a small amount to a new flask of food each day.
And how long has it been going now?
Over 30 years, they're past 75,000 generations.
Yeah.
In human terms, that's like watching evolution from before we were human all the way to today. And he's frozen samples every day, so he has a complete fossil record.
And he's watched them evolve new things.
He has. The most famous event was around generation 31,000. One of the 12 flasks suddenly evolved the ability to eat citrate, a chemical in their food broth that E. coli is not supposed to be able to digest in the presence of oxygen. It was like watching a population of cows evolve the ability to eat plastic. He caught a major evolutionary leap happening in a bottle.
So, okay, we've gone from rocks to giraffes to DNA to superbugs, but section 7 of our dive today is about modern ecology. How do we take all these mechanics of evolution and apply them to the big picture of how nature actually functions as a system?
Well, one of the big loose threads that Darwin himself left was the problem of altruism.
Being nice.
Yeah.
Self-sacrifice.
Exactly. If evolution is all about my own struggle to survive and pass on my genes, why does a worker bee sting an intruder and die to save the hive? Why does a squirrel scream to warn the flock about a hawk, revealing its own location to the predator? It seems like a terrible evolutionary move.
Right. The selfish move would be to stay quiet, hide, and let your buddy get eaten by the hawk.
This puzzled biologists for decades, until W.D. Hamilton, and later popularized by Richard Dawkins, came up with the idea of kin selection and the selfish gene.
What's the core idea?
They did the math. They realized that you share, on average, 50% of your genes with your brother or sister. You share about 12.5% with the first cousin, and so on.
So saving your family is, in a way, saving a part of yourself.
It's saving your own genes, which just happen to be housed in a different body. The famous biologist J.B.S. Haldane joked, "I would lay down my life for 2 brothers or 8 cousins."
Because 2 brothers is 100% of your genes, and 8 cousins is also 100%.
Exactly. Evolution doesn't actually care about the individual organism, the bee or the squirrel. It cares about the information in the DNA. The gene is the unit of selection. If you, the individual, die, but your sacrifice allows 3 of your siblings to survive and reproduce, that's a net win for your genes.
That actually explains a lot about human behavior too, doesn't it? The fierce loyalty we have to family.
It explains a huge amount of social behavior in mammals. It's the biology of family in a way.
We've also just seen this massive shift in the technology we use to study ecology. It used to be guys in tweed jackets with binoculars and notebooks. Now it's incredibly high-tech.
It's completely unrecognizable from a generation ago. We can use stable isotope analysis on a tiny piece of an animal's bone or hair to figure out exactly what it was eating 10 years ago and where it was living.
And the book talks about environmental DNA, or eDNA. What is that?
It's a total game changer. You can go to a river or a lake, you just dip a cup in and collect a sample of the water. Back in the lab, you sequence all the tiny bits of DNA that are floating in that watershed, skin cells, feces, mucus.
And from that water sample,
You can get a complete list of every single fish, frog, insect, and beaver that lives upstream from that point without ever having to see or catch a single one of them.
that is straight out of science fiction.
It changes everything for conservation and monitoring. We can see if an endangered species is present or if an invasive species has arrived instantly. And that leads us to the final and probably the most urgent point in this whole story. The shift in ecology from just observing nature to desperately trying to save it.
Rachel Carson, Silent Spring.
1962. That book was the wake-up call. It was the moment ecology became a household word and a political force. Before Carson, we just sprayed DDT, a powerful pesticide, everywhere to kill mosquitoes. We thought, dead mosquito, good, problem solved.
We didn't think about where the poison went after it killed the mosquito.
Carson showed us. She traced the path. The DDT washes into the rivers. The poison gets absorbed by the algae and the plankton. Then the small fish eat the plankton. The bigger fish eat the small fish. And the eagle or the osprey eats the big fish. At each step up the food chain, the poison becomes more concentrated.
Bioaccumulation.
And by the time it got to the top predators, like the bald eagle, the DDT was so concentrated that it made the shells of their eggs too thin to survive. The mothers would sit on them and they would just break.
And the eagle population plummeted.
She taught us the fundamental lesson of ecology. Nothing lives to itself. The world is not a collection of objects, it's a web of connections. You pull on a thread over here, and the entire tapestry unravels over there.
And now it feels like we are pulling on a lot of threads at once. Climate change, ocean acidification, deforestation, habitat loss.
We are now living in the Anthropocene, the human epoch. We have become the primary geological force on the planet. We move more dirt and rock with our machines than all the world's rivers combined. We change the chemistry of the atmosphere more than all the volcanoes.
And the book states, pretty starkly, that we are causing what scientists are now calling the sixth mass extinction.
The previous 5 were caused by things like asteroids and supervolcanoes. This one is caused by us. We are the asteroid. That's the hard truth of modern ecology.
And this brings me to the thought I wanted to end on. It's something that struck me when I was reading this section about ecological niches.
The job openings in nature?
Right. The idea that when the dinosaurs were wiped out by the asteroid, they vacated all these ecological niches. The big land herbivore job was suddenly open. The giant ocean predator job was open.
And mammals, our tiny shrew-like ancestors who were hiding in burrows, came out and took over. The disaster for the dinosaurs was the opportunity of a lifetime for us.
Exactly. Mass extinctions clear the board. They empty the niches, creating opportunities for new forms of life to radiate out.
So, your question is, if we are the asteroid,
If we are currently clearing the board, if we are wiping out the rhinos, the tigers, the elephants, the orangutans, all these highly specialized, magnificent creatures, what are we making room for? What kinds of organisms are we accidentally creating the perfect world for?
that is the haunting question, isn't it? Who inherits the Earth after the Anthropocene? Or, more accurately, who thrives alongside us in it?
The source material hints at it. Who survives best in a human-dominated world?
The generalists, the opportunists, the things that breed fast, eat anything, and can live in the cracks of our civilization, the things that thrive on disruption and waste.
Rats, crows, roaches, jellyfish in the warming oceans.
We are building a world that was perfect for rats and jellyfish. We are clearing the stage of the specialists, the beautiful, fragile, complex things that took millions of years to evolve, and we're handing the keys to the kingdom to the ultimate survivors.
It's a sobering thought. But I guess that's the point of this entire deep dive, isn't it? To see the mechanism. Evolution doesn't care if we think a panda is cute or a tiger is majestic. It just asks one cold question. Can you survive and reproduce in the environment as it exists right now?
And right now, the environment is us. We are the selection pressure.
Well, on that cheerful note, this has been a journey. From a perfect static ladder to a chaotic, ever-changing movie.
It's a movie that's still running. And that's the main takeaway. We aren't just the audience watching it. We are in the film. We're the writers and the directors now, whether we like it or not.
The Ecology Book. Definitely worth a read if you want to understand the plot of that movie. Thanks for diving in with us.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.